No one wanted the Apache girl for $2 until a lonely cowboy took her home. The sun rose slowly over the small, dusty town, casting long, golden streaks across the marketplace. The air was dry and warm, carrying the faint scent of hay and leather. People were already gathering in the open square, murmuring among themselves as they prepared for the day's events. There was an unusual energy in the air today, a mixture of curiosity and unease, as the town's folk had heard whispers about the young Apache girl who was to be put up for sale. She stood at the edge of the square, her small frame hunched slightly, eyes wide and uncertain. Her clothes were simple and worn, patched in several places, but clean. She clutched a small bundle of her few belongings close to her chest. Her hair was black and long, tied in a simple braid that swung slightly as she shifted from foot to foot. Around her, people whispered and cast sideways glances, their faces filled with suspicion, judgment, or simple disinterest. The auctioneer, a tall man with a weathered face and booming voice, stepped forward. His hands waved over the crowd as he began his performance. "Step right up. Today we have something special for you, a young girl, strong and healthy, only $2 to start." His voice carried across the square, drawing more people toward the scene. The girl's heart beat fast. She had been told to stay quiet and obedient, but the words felt heavy in her small chest. She wanted to speak, to explain herself, to say she was more than what they saw, but her voice caught in her throat. The crowd, however, was not interested in her feelings or her story. They were here for entertainment, or perhaps out of curiosity, waiting to see if anyone would take her, if anyone would care enough to pay the small sum. The auctioneer continued, lowering his voice and then raising it again in practiced rhythm. $2. $2 for a girl who can work hard, help with chores, and learn quickly. Who will take her? A few men stepped forward, looked at the girl for a moment, then shook their heads and walked away. "Not worth the trouble," one muttered. "Better spend the money on something useful." Others laughed quietly among themselves, thinking of her as a simple commodity, not as a child with hopes, fears, or dreams. The girl's eyes welled up with tears, but she blinked them away quickly. She had learned early on that crying in public only brought more humiliation. She stood still, waiting, trying to make herself small, almost invisible, though she felt every gaze like a sharp poke. The murmurs grew louder as the auctioneer tried to entice the remaining onlookers. "Come now, folks. She's healthy, strong, and ready to learn. Who wants a young helper for just $2? A bargain, I tell you." The sunlight fell on the girl's face, highlighting the fine curve of her cheekbones and the determination in her eyes, even though her body trembled with fear. Some of the villagers whispered among themselves, questioning her origin, making assumptions about her character and abilities, all without knowing her at all. Their prejudice made the girl shrink further, but a small flame of defiance burned inside her. She would survive this day somehow. She had to. Hours seemed to pass as she stood there, barely daring to breathe. People came and went, casting glances that ranged from curiosity to disdain, but no one made a move to bid. It was as if the girl were invisible, or worse, unworthy. She felt the weight of loneliness pressing down on her small shoulders. The marketplace, usually bustling with the chatter of neighbors and merchants, now felt like a stage of judgment. Every word, every look from the crowd seemed to remind her that she was alone. Some of the older women in the crowd shook their heads. "Who would want a child like her?" one whispered. "So quiet, so timid. It's as if she's never even seen the world." Their words stung, though she kept her gaze low, afraid that meeting their eyes would invite further cruelty. A few men laughed quietly, muttering that she would be nothing but trouble, someone who would never obey. The girl's stomach twisted with fear and anxiety, but she tried to keep her face steady, showing neither tears nor fear. The auctioneer, seeing that no one was bidding, frowned slightly. He looked at the girl with a mixture of frustration and pity. $2. Come on, folks. Someone must see the value here. She's capable, strong, and quick to learn. She'll do anything you ask." He gestured toward her, emphasizing his words. The girl felt the heat of the sun on her back and her throat tightened. She wanted to speak, to explain that she was more than what they saw. She had learned skills from her mother, lessons about survival, about resilience, about caring for those around her. But the crowd was not listening. They saw only what they wanted, a cheap laborer, a distraction, someone to pass their judgment upon. Then a shadow fell across the square. The girl looked up and saw a man standing at the edge of the crowd, watching quietly. He was different from the others. His clothes were simple but clean. His face was weathered, and his eyes carried a depth of thought and quiet understanding. Unlike the others, he did not whisper or laugh. He simply watched, as if he could see the fear, the strength, and the spirit within the girl that no one else noticed. The auctioneer noticed him as well and called out, "Well, will you take her for $2? The man stepped forward slowly. He did not speak at first, only studied the girl carefully. She looked back at him, unsure what to expect. Most people would take her for granted or worse, exploit her fear. But something in his gaze was different. There was no judgment, no mockery, only consideration and perhaps a touch of kindness. Whispers ran through the crowd. "Who is he?" one woman asked. "He looks like he has a heart, but who would buy her?" Others shook their heads, muttering that even if he did, it would be foolish. But the man ignored them all. He placed $2 on the table, and the auctioneer's eyes widened in surprise. $2, he shouted, almost laughing in disbelief. "Sold to the gentleman at the edge." The girl's heart skipped a beat. She could hardly believe it. For the first time, someone had seen her as more than a price tag. Someone had chosen her when no one else would. She wanted to speak, to thank him, to express the mix of relief and hope swirling inside her, but she only nodded slightly. Words failed her. The man stepped forward, extending a hand, but not in a commanding way. It was gentle, offering guidance rather than control. "Come with me," he said softly. The girl hesitated, looking back at the square, at the villagers who had avoided her, whispered about her, and judged her. Then she took a deep breath and took his hand, stepping toward a life she could never have imagined just hours ago. The journey from the marketplace to his ranch was quiet. Neither spoke much at first. The girl kept her eyes lowered, unsure how to act, unsure if she was allowed to hope. The man, sensing her hesitation, remained patient, giving her space to adjust to this sudden change. They walked past fields where the wind blew freely, past streams that glimmered in the sunlight, and slowly the girl felt the tight knot of fear inside her loosen just a little. By the time they reached the ranch, the girl was exhausted, but also strangely curious. The man led her inside, showing her the simple cabin and the small chores she might help with. He did not demand anything of her, only offered her a place to rest, food to eat, and a promise of safety. For the first time in her young life, she felt a small spark of hope flicker inside her heart. The villagers watched from a distance as she stepped into the ranch with the cowboy, their whispers trailing behind her. "Why would he take her?" one asked. "What does he see that we do?" No one had the answer, and perhaps that was the point. The girl had found someone who saw her worth, someone who chose her when the rest of the world had turned away. Inside the cabin, the girl finally allowed herself to breathe. She sat quietly by the fire, clutching her bundle of belongings, and watched the cowboy move about the room. There was a calm, steady rhythm to his actions that was almost soothing. He noticed her gaze and smiled briefly, a quiet reassurance that everything would be all right, at least for now. That night, as the sun dipped below the horizon and the first stars began to twinkle in the sky, the girl lay on a simple bed, her mind racing with thoughts. She thought about the marketplace, the faces of the people who had ignored her, and the unexpected kindness of the man who had chosen her. For the first time, she felt the possibility of belonging somewhere, of being more than just a forgotten child. And as she drifted off to sleep, she realized that this day, The day everyone had refused her, the day she had felt invisible, had also been the day her life began to change. The next morning, the Apache girl awoke to a soft light spilling into the cabin through the small window. The air smelled faintly of fresh hay and wood smoke, and for the first time in a long time, she felt the strange comfort of safety. The cowboy had already started his morning chores, moving quietly and efficiently. She watched him from her bed, noticing the careful way he fed the animals, mended fences, and tended to the small garden outside. There was a rhythm to his work that felt steady, dependable, and entirely unlike the chaos she had known in the marketplace. After a while, he noticed her awake and turned with a gentle nod. "Good morning," he said simply. His voice was calm and steady, not loud or commanding like the auctioneer had been. There was no anger, no mockery, just a simple greeting filled with quiet kindness. The girl hesitated, unsure what to say. "Good morning," she replied softly, her voice barely above a whisper. She had spoken to strangers before, but their words had always carried judgment or disappointment. Here, however, his tone made her feel safe enough to answer, even if only in the smallest way. He smiled slightly and gestured toward the cabin door. "Come on, let me show you around. You can help a little if you want, or just watch for now. It's up to you." The girl stood slowly, clutching her small bundle of belongings. She followed him outside, where the ranch stretched before her like a small, quiet world. The fields were golden with morning sunlight, and the animals, horses, chickens, and a few cows, moved peacefully in their pens. The sound of birds chirping and the wind rustling through the trees made her chest feel lighter than it had in months. The cowboy began to show her the ranch, explaining small things as they went. "This is the barn. Horses stay here. You don't have to touch them if you're scared, but they're gentle," he said, pointing toward a few horses grazing quietly. "The chickens are over there. They need food in the morning and water. And the garden, you'll see it has vegetables and herbs. You can help if you like." The girl listened carefully, taking in everything around her. The world felt so different here, calm, safe, and full of possibility. She had never imagined a place where she could simply exist without fear, without the weight of judgment pressing down on her every movement. Even the small tasks the cowboy described seemed meaningful, not humiliating or demeaning. After a while, he handed her a small basket. "Why don't you try collecting some eggs? The chickens lay them in the morning. It's simple, but it helps us both." Her hands shook slightly as she approached the chickens. They clucked and pecked at the ground, moving with curious interest toward her. She hesitated, then carefully picked up the eggs, placing them gently in the basket. The cowboy watched silently, offering encouragement with a nod or a small smile when she did it correctly. For the first time in her life, the girl felt a sense of accomplishment. She had done something useful, not for the approval of strangers, but because someone had shown her kindness and guidance. Each small success made her chest swell with a new feeling, a quiet pride that had been foreign to her until now. As the morning passed, the cowboy moved from task to task, sometimes explaining what he was doing, sometimes working in silence. The girl followed, learning without being pressured, discovering that she could contribute in her own small ways. She began to feel a bond forming between them, a fragile connection based on trust rather than fear. At midday, they stopped for a simple meal. The cowboy cooked over a small fire, preparing beans and bread. He handed her a plate and gestured toward a log to sit on. "Eat," he said softly. "We'll talk after." The girl sat quietly, chewing slowly. She was careful not to ask too many questions or speak too freely, unsure what was expected of her. But the cowboy did not demand conversation. Instead, he ate in silence, giving her space while still including her in the routine. The quiet respect he showed her spoke louder than any words could have. After they finished, he sat back and looked at her. "You don't have to be afraid," he said simply. "I know people have been unkind to you, but here you're safe. You can stay as long as you need. "No one will hurt you." The girl's eyes widened. She had never heard such words directed at her before. Most adults she had known either ignored her, scolded her, or treated her as if she were a burden. The idea that someone could care enough to offer her safety without expecting anything in return was overwhelming. She wanted to speak, to express her gratitude, but the words felt too large and fragile for her small voice. She nodded instead, hoping her gesture would convey at least a fraction of what she felt. Over the next few days, the girl slowly began to explore her new life on the ranch. The cowboy taught her how to feed the animals, water the garden, and keep the cabin tidy. Each task was simple, yet meaningful. For the first time, she understood the value of work done with purpose, not out of fear or punishment, but because it contributed to something larger than herself. The cowboy was patient. When she made mistakes, spilling water for the plants or dropping an egg, he corrected her gently, showing her the right way without anger. He praised her when she succeeded, not with loud words but with a quiet nod, a small smile, or a simple, "good job." The girl found herself striving to learn, not out of fear of punishment, but out of a desire to meet his quiet expectations and to prove to herself that she could. Evenings were the hardest for the girl. Memories of the marketplace, the whispers of strangers, and the cold indifference of the villagers haunted her. Sometimes she would lie awake, staring at the ceiling of the cabin, feeling a pang of fear and loneliness. But then she would hear the soft sounds of the cowboy moving about, feeding the animals one last time, closing the barn doors, or simply sitting by the fire. And she would feel a tiny comfort, a reminder that she was not alone. One evening she gathered the courage to ask a question. Why did you take me?" she asked quietly, her voice trembling. The cowboy paused, looking at her with thoughtful eyes. He did not answer immediately. Finally, he said, "Because no one else did. Because you deserve more than fear and loneliness. That's all. Sometimes the right choice is just to do what seems fair, even if it surprises everyone else." The girl thought about his words long after he had finished speaking. They were simple, yet they carried a weight she had never known. For the first time, she felt that she had value, that someone had seen her not as a commodity but as a person, someone worth protecting, worth caring for. Days turned into weeks, and the girl began to grow more comfortable in her new life. She learned to ride the horses with careful guidance, discovered how to care for the garden, and started helping with the cooking and cleaning. Each day her confidence grew, and so did the quiet bond between her and the cowboy. He was no longer just the man who had bought her. He was a teacher, a protector, and slowly, a friend. The villagers continued to whisper and gossip about the girl and the cowboy, but their words no longer held power over her. She had found something they could not take away: safety, kindness, and the chance to belong. She began to see the ranch not just as a place to survive, but as a home where she could grow and learn, where her small voice mattered, and where she could begin to imagine a future that had once seemed impossible. One afternoon, while tending to the chickens, the cowboy watched her quietly from the barn doorway. He saw the way she moved, careful but confident, hesitant but determined, and he smiled softly. He did not speak, for words were not needed. The girl, sensing his gaze, looked up and returned his smile with a shy, tentative one of her own. In that moment, a silent understanding passed between them. Trust was building, slowly but surely, and the difficult journey of healing and belonging had only just begun. The sun began to set, painting the sky with streaks of pink and orange. The girl stood at the edge of the field, watching the light fade, and felt a strange warmth in her chest. For the first time in her young life, she felt that she had a place where she was wanted, where she mattered, and where someone had chosen her, not for what she could do, but for who she was. And though the world outside the ranch remained uncertain and harsh, she felt a small, bright hope that perhaps, just perhaps, life could be kinder than she had ever imagined. The days on the ranch grew longer and warmer as spring settled into the small valley. The Apache girl had begun to feel more comfortable in her new home, though her heart still carried shadows from the marketplace and the cold indifference of strangers. Every morning she woke to the sounds of birds chirping, the horses neighing softly in the barn, and the gentle clink of metal as the cowboy worked on chores. It was a different kind of life, slower, steadier, safer, but it demanded patience and courage in ways she had not known before. The cowboy, quiet and steady as ever, continued his gentle guidance. He never forced her to do anything she was not ready for. Instead, he encouraged her with small gestures, like showing her how to hold the horses, reins, or explaining how to plant seeds in neat rows in the garden. He praised her quietly when she succeeded and corrected her gently when she faltered. Each small success brought a flicker of pride to the girl, a warmth that pushed back the fear she had carried for so long. One morning, as the girl gathered eggs from the chicken coop, she noticed a group of villagers walking along the dusty road toward the ranch. Their faces were curious, skeptical, and full of judgment. She felt her stomach tighten with anxiety, a familiar sense of unease returning. The cowboy, noticing her tension, rested a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "Don't worry," he said softly. "We'll handle this together. You don't have to be afraid." The villagers approached, their eyes scanning the property. Some whispered to each other, while others openly stared at the girl as if she were a curiosity. One older man stepped forward, squinting at her. "Is this the girl from the marketplace?" he asked, his tone a mix of suspicion and disbelief. "Yes," the cowboy replied calmly. "She is, and she's welcome here." The man's eyes narrowed. "Welcome? You bought her for $2. Do you think she belongs to you now?" The cowboy's gaze was steady, unwavering. "I didn't buy her to own her," he said. "I took her in because no one else would and because she deserves safety and a chance to live her life. She's not a commodity, she's a person." The villagers murmured among themselves, unsure how to respond. Some shook their heads, muttering about foolishness and wasting money, but the girl could see a shift in their expressions. They realized that this man treated her differently than anyone else ever had. She felt a small, quiet pride in her chest, not for herself exactly, but for the recognition that someone could care enough to stand up for her, even in the face of judgment. After the villagers left, the girl lingered by the garden, picking herbs with careful fingers. "Why did they come here?" she asked softly, still feeling a flutter of fear in her chest. "They came to see," the cowboy said simply. "They wanted to understand why I would help someone like you. Most people don't understand kindness until they see it in action." The girl nodded, thinking about his words. It was strange but comforting to realize that someone could act with decency even when others doubted or scorned them. She began to see that life could be different, that there were people who valued courage, patience, and compassion more than gossip or judgment. As the days passed, the girl began to take on more responsibilities around the ranch. She helped water the garden, learned how to feed the animals properly, and even started to cook simple meals with the cowboy's guidance. Each new task taught her something valuable, not just about work, but about trust, patience, and the importance of caring for others. One afternoon, while tending to the horses, the girl hesitated as she approached a large brown mare. Her heart pounded and she could feel the sweat on her palms. The cowboy noticed her hesitation and came over quietly. "Take your time," he said. "The horse can sense your fear. Be calm and she will respond." The girl took a deep breath, then slowly held out her hand. The mare sniffed it cautiously, then nuzzled her gently. A smile spread across the girl's face, small but full of wonder. "She's nice," she whispered. "She is," the cowboy said softly, watching her with quiet approval. "You just needed to give her time to trust you, just like people sometimes need time to trust each other." The girl thought about those words long after. She realized that trust was not given all at once. It had to be earned, nurtured, and respected. She had spent so long fearing the world, fearing people, that she had forgotten how to believe in kindness. But here, on the ranch, she was learning again. Slowly, carefully, step by step. Evenings were a time of reflection and gentle learning. The cowboy often shared stories about the land, the animals, and life on the ranch. Sometimes he spoke of lessons learned through hardship. Other times he simply talked about the beauty of the world around them. The girl listened intently, fascinated by the richness of his experiences. She began to see that the world was not entirely cruel, that there was hope, bravery, and compassion, even in places where it seemed impossible to find. One evening, as the sun set in a blaze of pink and orange across the valley, the girl asked a question she had been carrying for some time. Why? Why do you help me? Why did you choose me when everyone else ignored me? The cowboy paused, looking at her with thoughtful eyes. Because it was the right thing to do, he said simply. Sometimes the right choice is also the hardest. No one else wanted you, and I couldn't stand by and let you be left alone. You deserved more than that. The girl felt tears prick at the corners of her eyes. She had never known anyone who would act purely out of kindness, without expectation or reward. She felt a deep gratitude, not only for her safety, but for the recognition that she had value, that she was seen, and that her life mattered. As the weeks turned into months, the girl grew stronger, more confident, and more skilled in her daily tasks. She learned to ride the horses with ease, care for the animals, and tend to the garden with diligence. Each success, each small accomplishment, gave her a sense of pride she had never known. And through it all, the cowboy remained patient, supportive, and steady, a guiding presence she could rely on, a quiet source of strength and encouragement. One day, while they were working together in the garden, the girl noticed the cowboy watching her closely. She hesitated, unsure what he expected, but he only smiled gently. "You're learning quickly," he said, "and not just the chores, you're learning to trust yourself too." The girl felt warmth spread through her chest. Trust herself. She realized that for the first time in her life, she could make choices, take actions, and believe in her own abilities. She was not just a child to be watched over. She was becoming capable, strong, and independent, even in small ways. Despite the progress, there were still moments of fear and uncertainty. Occasionally, she would recall the marketplace, the whispers of strangers, and the moments of rejection that had left deep scars. But each time, she found that the cowboy's presence gave her courage. His steady guidance and unwavering support reminded her that she was not alone, that she had someone who believed in her, and that she could face challenges without fear. One afternoon, a small storm rolled over the valley. The wind howled through the trees and rain began to fall in sheets. The girl watched from the cabin window, feeling a flutter of anxiety, but the cowboy came to her side, his hand on her shoulder. "Storms come and go," he said calmly. "We'll be safe here. There's nothing to fear." As the rain fell, the girl felt the truth of his words. She realized that life could still be frightening, that challenges would always arise, but she now had the courage and support to face them. She had learned that safety was not just a place. It was the trust, guidance, and love of someone who cared. By the end of the storm, the girl felt stronger, braver, and more confident than ever before. She began to see herself not as a helpless child, but as someone capable of growth, resilience, and hope. And she began to understand that her journey on the ranch was only the beginning, a path of learning, trust, and the quiet building of a life she could call her own. The ranch had become a quiet haven, a place where the Apache girl could finally breathe without fear. She had grown stronger, more confident, and skilled in her daily tasks, but the world outside the valley was not always kind. One morning, as she was feeding the chickens, she noticed a group of strangers approaching along the dusty road. Their faces were hard and unfamiliar, their eyes sharp with curiosity and suspicion. The girl's heart tightened immediately, a cold knot of fear forming in her stomach. She had seen that look before, the same look from the marketplace, the same disinterest and judgment that had left her feeling invisible. She froze, unsure whether to run or stay, her small hands clutching the basket of eggs tightly. The cowboy appeared at her side almost instantly. He did not speak at first. Instead, he placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder and gave her a calm, steadying look. "Stay here," he said quietly. "I'll handle this, you just keep calm." The strangers stopped at the edge of the ranch, their eyes sweeping over the property. One of them, a tall man with a rough face and a booming voice, stepped forward. "Is this the girl from the marketplace?" he demanded. "We heard she's been living here, she belongs to us, we want her back." The cowboy did not flinch. He stood tall, his voice calm but firm. "She belongs here. You had your chance and no one else wanted her. I took her in because she deserves safety and a home. You will not take her from here." The man sneered. "You think you can stop us? She's just a child and she's worth more to us than a few days of trouble. Hand her over." The girl's fear surged, but something inside her began to stir, something she had not felt before. The months on the ranch had taught her strength, courage, and resilience. She could feel it in her bones now, a quiet determination to stand alongside the cowboy who had become her protector. The cowboy noticed the tension rising in her. He gave her a small nod, a silent encouragement. "Remember what I've taught you," he whispered. "Stay close, stay calm, and trust yourself." The strangers moved closer, but the cowboy stepped forward, placing himself between them and the girl. He spoke with quiet authority. "You will not frighten her. You will not take her. Leave now and no harm will come to you. Stay and you will answer for it." The tall man laughed harshly, but he could see the resolve in the cowboy's eyes. There was no hesitation, no fear, only unwavering determination. He signaled the others, and after a tense moment they stepped back. "This isn't over," the man said, his voice full of threat before turning and leaving down the road. The girl's hands trembled and she felt her knees weaken, but the cowboy wrapped his arms around her in a comforting embrace. "It's okay," he said softly. "You're safe. Nothing will hurt you here." For the first time, the girl realized how much she had grown. She had faced fear before, but this was different. She had faced danger and survived, not alone, but with someone who had taught her strength, courage, and the value of standing firm. Over the following days, the girl worked even harder around the ranch. She fed the animals, tended the garden, and learned to ride the horses with more confidence than ever before. Each task was no longer just a chore. It was a lesson in resilience, independence, and trust. The cowboy continued to guide her gently, offering encouragement rather than criticism, and teaching her that mistakes were part of learning, not something to fear. One afternoon, as they repaired a fence near the edge of the property, the girl noticed movement in the distance. A small group of men had returned, looking more determined than before. Her stomach tightened again, but this time she did not freeze. She stood tall, side by side with the cowboy, ready to face whatever came. The leader of the group shouted, "Hand her over." "She belongs with us." The cowboy stepped forward, blocking their path. "No," he said firmly, "you will not take her. She is safe here and I will not allow you to harm her. Leave now." The men hesitated, unsure how to respond. The cowboy's stance, calm yet unwavering, showed them that he was serious. The girl could feel his strength radiating, and it gave her courage. She realized that she was not powerless. She had learned to face fear, to stand her ground, and to trust in the guidance of someone who cared for her. The group of men eventually retreated, muttering threats under their breath. The girl's heart pounded with adrenaline, but she also felt a strange sense of triumph. For the first time, she had not only been protected but had stood alongside her protector, ready to face the danger together. In the evenings, the girl and the cowboy would sit by the fire, reflecting on the day's events. "You were very brave today," he told her one evening, his eyes warm with approval. "Not just because of the men, but because you trusted yourself. You didn't run and you didn't give in to fear. That's courage." The girl blushed slightly, unsure how to respond. Courage had been a foreign concept to her for most of her life. But now she could feel it growing within her, a quiet, steady strength that would help her face the challenges yet to come. As the days passed, the ranch remained peaceful, but the girl knew that the world outside was still unpredictable. She had learned that safety and trust were gifts, not guarantees, and that she had to remain vigilant while continuing to grow and learn. The cowboy continued to guide her, teaching her not only about the work around the ranch but about resilience, kindness, and the importance of standing up for oneself and others. One afternoon, as they worked together in the garden, the girl paused and looked at the cowboy. "I feel stronger now," she said softly, "not just here but inside. I think I can face things I never thought I could." The cowboy smiled, a quiet, approving smile. "You can," he said. "You've learned that fear is something to recognize, not something to let control you. You've learned that courage isn't the absence of fear, it's acting despite it. And you've learned that you are never alone, even when the world seems harsh." The girl nodded, feeling a warmth in her chest. She realized that her journey had changed her, that she had grown in ways she had never imagined possible. She had learned to trust, to hope, and to stand strong even in the face of danger. And she had learned that she could rely on the cowboy, not just as a protector, but as a guide and a friend who believed in her when no one else did. The bond between them had deepened, built on trust, courage, and mutual respect. The cowboy treated her as more than a child in need of care. He treated her as a person capable of growth, learning, and strength. And the girl, in turn, had begun to see herself not as a victim of circumstance, but as someone capable of facing the world, standing firm, and embracing the life she had been given. As the sun set one evening, painting the sky in hues of pink and orange, the girl stood at the edge of the field, watching the light fade over the valley. She felt a quiet sense of pride and accomplishment. The world outside might still hold danger and uncertainty, but here on this ranch, she had found courage, strength, and hope. She had survived challenges, faced fear, and learned that she was capable of more than she had ever imagined. And though storms and challenges would come, she now knew she could face them, not alone but with someone who believed in her, guided her, and had taught her that even in a world that could be cruel, kindness, bravery, and resilience could create a safe place to grow, learn, and thrive. The Apache girl had become more than the frightened child from the marketplace. She was strong, brave, and capable, ready to face the challenges of the world with courage and the guidance of the cowboy who had shown her what it meant to be seen, valued, and protected. The days of fear were behind her, replaced by a growing sense of hope, trust, and the knowledge that she could stand firm, no matter what came next. The sun rose slowly over the ranch, casting warm golden light across the fields. The Apache girl awoke with a sense of calm she had never known before. The world outside could be harsh, unkind, and unpredictable, but here, on this quiet piece of land with the cowboy, she felt a sense of belonging that warmed her heart. The past months had changed her. She was no longer the frightened child who had stood in the marketplace, ignored and judged. She had learned to trust, to face fear, and to act with courage. Each day the cowboy had guided her, taught her, and protected her, showing her not only how to care for the animals and tend the garden, but also how to care for herself. She had learned patience, resilience, and the quiet strength that comes from knowing you are seen, valued, and loved. That morning, the girl rose early to help with the animals. She moved through the barn with ease, feeding the horses, collecting eggs, and checking the water troughs. Her hands were steady now, her movements confident. As she worked, she reflected on how far she had come. She remembered the fear and uncertainty that had filled her heart when she was bought for $2. Back then, she had been invisible, unwanted, and alone. Now, she felt the warmth of safety and the quiet power of trust. The cowboy joined her outside, carrying a small bucket of feed for the horses. He watched her carefully, a small smile on his face. "You're doing well," he said softly. "I'm proud of you. You've come a long way." The girl blushed slightly at his praise. I feel different," she admitted quietly. "I feel stronger. I feel like I belong here." The cowboy nodded. "You do belong here," he said. "Not because of what you can do, but because of who you are. You're brave, kind, and capable. And you've earned every bit of respect you have. Never forget that." The girl smiled, feeling a sense of peace she had never experienced before. She had learned that belonging was not about being accepted by everyone else. It was about finding a place, and people who saw your value, who believed in you, and who stood by you even when the world did not. She had found that place on the ranch, with the cowboy who had given her safety, guidance, and trust. That afternoon, they worked together in the garden. The girl carefully watered the rows of vegetables, her small hands moving steadily over the plants. She looked up at the cowboy and noticed a soft, approving gaze. "You've learned quickly," he said. "Not just the chores, but the lessons of life here. You've grown so much." The girl felt warmth spread through her chest. She had learned more than she could have imagined in the past months. She had learned courage, patience, and the importance of trust. She had learned that fear could be faced and overcome, and that kindness and strength could exist even in a world that often seemed cruel. As the days passed, the girl became more confident and independent. She learned to ride the horses across the open fields, feeling the wind rush against her face, and discovered the joy of accomplishment in every task she completed. The cowboy continued to guide her, but he also gave her space to grow, allowing her to learn from her mistakes and successes alike. She had become more than a child in need of protection. She had become a young person capable of making choices, taking action, and standing strong in the face of challenges. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of pink and orange, the girl and the cowboy sat together by the small fire outside the cabin. The gentle crackle of the flames and the distant sounds of animals created a sense of calm and safety. She looked at the cowboy, her eyes reflecting the fading light. Do you think I can face the world now?" she asked quietly, her voice filled with both curiosity and a hint of doubt. The cowboy smiled warmly. "Yes," he said, "you can face anything. You've learned courage, patience, and strength. You've seen that even when the world is harsh, you can stand firm. You've learned that you are never truly alone, and that you can trust yourself and the people who care about you." The girl nodded slowly, feeling the truth of his words settle in her heart. For the first time, she believed in herself, not just in the safety of the ranch, but in the world beyond it. She had faced fear, danger, and uncertainty, and she had grown stronger because of it. The next morning, a visitor arrived at the ranch, a kind woman from a nearby town who had heard about the girl and the cowboy. She had come to offer help, supplies, and friendship. The girl felt a mixture of curiosity and nervousness as the woman approached, but the cowboy encouraged her gently. "It's okay," he said. "You can trust her. She's here to help, not judge." The woman smiled warmly at the girl. "I've heard about you," she said. "I wanted to meet you and see if there's anything I can do to help. You've been through a lot, but I can see how strong and capable you are. You have a bright future ahead." The girl felt her heart swell with gratitude. For the first time, she realized that kindness existed beyond the ranch, that people could care without expecting anything in return. She felt a sense of hope for the future, a life filled with opportunity, growth, and the chance to continue learning, exploring, and thriving. Over the following weeks, the girl continued to grow and flourish. She learned new skills, helped care for the animals, and even began teaching the younger children from the nearby town simple tasks and lessons. She discovered the joy of helping others, of sharing knowledge and kindness, and of seeing the impact of her actions. The cowboy watched with quiet pride, knowing that she had become strong, independent, and confident. One evening, as they watched the sunset together, the girl turned to the cowboy. I'm happy here," she said softly. "I feel like I finally belong somewhere, and I know it's because of you." The cowboy smiled, a quiet, proud smile. "No," he said gently, "it's because of you. You've worked hard, been brave, and learned to trust yourself. I only guided you, but the strength is all yours. You've earned everything you have." The girl felt tears prick at the corners of her eyes. For the first time in her life, she felt truly seen, truly valued, and truly capable. She had come so far from the frightened child in the marketplace, and she knew that her journey was only beginning. But she also knew that no matter what challenges came, she had the courage, skills, and support to face them. As the weeks turned into months, the girl and the cowboy continued to live their quiet life on the ranch. The girl grew stronger, wiser, and more confident each day. She became a source of joy, help, and inspiration to those around her. And she realized that family and belonging were not always about blood. They were about trust, kindness, and the people who choose to stand by you, no matter what. One day, as they stood together on a hill overlooking the valley, the girl took a deep breath and felt the wind on her face. She thought of the marketplace, the $2 auction, and the world that had once seemed so cruel. And she realized that those experiences, though painful, had led her to this place, to safety, trust, and a life filled with hope. She turned to the cowboy and smiled. "Thank you," she said softly, "for everything, for seeing me, trusting me, and helping me grow. I will never forget it." The cowboy placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. "You don't have to thank me," he said. "I only did what anyone who cares would do. The courage, strength, and hope are all yours. Never forget that." The girl looked out over the valley, feeling a quiet sense of peace. The past could not be changed, but the future was hers to shape. She had learned courage, resilience, trust, and the value of kindness. She had found a place where she belonged, where she was seen, valued, and loved. And she knew that whatever came next, she would face it with strength, hope, and the knowledge that she was never truly alone. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the fields, the girl felt a deep, unshakable sense of belonging. She had been unwanted, judged, and ignored, yet she had found safety, guidance, and love. She had faced fear and danger, learned to trust, and discovered her own courage. And now she stood ready to embrace life, confident in her worth, her abilities, and the people who cared for her. The Apache girl had come full circle, from a frightened child sold for $2 to a young person filled with hope, strength, and the quiet confidence that she could face anything the world had to offer. And in that moment, standing on the hill with the cowboy by her side, she knew that she had finally found her home, a place of safety, love, and endless possibility.